Pittsburgh Steelers fans, what's going on? This is Jeff Hartman, senior editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, with you for another episode of the Pittsburgh Steelers postgame show. The Steelers, they didn't lose. They didn't win either. They tied 16-16 against the Detroit Lions in Week 10. The guy to my, I guess on your screen, my left, right, I don't know. Dave Schofield was on my couch watching the game with me. Dave, what's going on, and what are your thoughts on this game?
That was ugly.
Yeah.
You don't deserve to win games when you are -3 in turnovers. You definitely don't deserve games when you are -2 in turnovers in overtime. These are games that you should lose. The fact that they didn't lose was unbelievable, but still, when you even the tie, it feels like a loss.
Definitely does feel like a loss, and rightfully so. The 0-8 Lions coming to town, but the Steelers, boy, did they have some stuff not go their way. We'll put it that way. Ben Roethlisberger, as we talked about yesterday on our podcast platform, he was out on the COVID list after testing positive. On top of that, a slew of injuries for the Steelers that came from this game. TJ Watt with a hip and knee. You had, I believe, I'm trying to think. I could look at the article I wrote, but I don't have it in front of me. We also had two offensive guards go down,
Yep.
Dotson and Turner with an ankle, and Joe Hayden with a mid-foot sprain. Dave, what do you think about these injuries? That adds insult to injury.
Insult to injury, yeah. The two guards that's just one of those things where it's like, of course they're going to have two of their three interior offensive linemen, and probably the two that were playing the best, because based on some things that happened otherwise, were the two that went down, because the Steelers only kept one backup for this game. They chose to have Zach Banner active, give him a helmet, just in case they might have wanted to slide him into tackle at some point if anyone was struggling. And instead, that leaves Joe Haig having to play guard. Now, I know he's played guard in the past. I have no idea how much he's played guard, in all honesty. So not the ideal situation. Would have been nice to have BJ Finney. Really, at that point, it didn't matter. It was just the whole idea, not more of the personnel. Was like, of course, the game that the Steelers only have one reserve there, they're going to lose two guys. That's just how it's going to go. I mean, TJ Watt's injury looked bad. Then he's out of the blue tent and holding his helmet and running around, and the next thing you know, we're told it's a hip. Injuries, man, it was brutal. I ended up. How much of the game did I have to miss because I kept having to write all these injury articles? It was ridiculous.
Well, and the thing is, too, is that you look at the injuries that were sustained, and it makes this tie even worse. If you were somehow able to find a way to win this game, even if it was an overtime win where you kick the game-winning field goal, you leave with a win, and you're thinking, okay, well, at least even though they sustained injuries, they were able to notch that win, and they were to keep that streak going, but they weren't able to say that. The Steelers at 5-3-1 now. They do not claim first place in the AFC North. They remain in second place. It's a crazy game. It reminds me of the last time they tied in 2018 Week 1 against Cleveland when they played against Tyrod Taylor, and you're left wondering, like, what in the world was that? Like, that's my knee-jerk reaction, is what was that? There were a lot of things to talk about in this game in terms of offense and defense, and we're going to get to all those. Let's first talk about the offense, as we always do in part one. Let's get right to it. Mason Rudolph, we always start with the quarterback. 30 of 50. He threw the ball 50 times in that weather. That's something we're going to talk about here shortly. 242 yards, a 4.8 average, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 0 sacks, was not sacked, for a rating of 70.6. It also should be noted Rudolph rushed for four rushes for 36 yards with a long of 26. Okay, Dave, don't have to grade it, but what do you think about Rudolph's game?
I don't think Rudolph lost the game for him. If you know what I mean. Well, they didn't lose the game, but it sure does feel like it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not that's yes, the offense might not have been the same. It was a lot of different factors, and the high passes, and then after he has a high pass, then he skips one in. It was almost like that. But then again, at the same time, that was crappy weather. That was really crappy weather to throw the ball 50 times. And that's why sometimes we're like, could they have just ran it a little bit more, even if it was running it with Rudolph. He wasn't afraid to get in there and mix it up and run somebody over. That might have been a little bit nice, but it honestly, other than the 50 attempts, it's kind of what I thought the Steelers might get from Mason Rudolph. Probably going to turn the ball over once. Try to do his best to manage the game. It's just it wasn't enough to get a victory.
Yeah, Wilson Pava gives us $4.99. Thank you for the tip. He said Mason is not the quarterback of the future. Just glad it's not a loss. Hopefully Muth doesn't let the fumble get to him. Got to hope injuries are minor. On to LA. Yeah, I'm not sure if anyone after 2019 viewed Mason Rudolph as the future. I think that Mason Rudolph is a capable backup quarterback. I'm pretty sure most would agree with that. But let's go ahead and talk about some play calling here because Dave Shipley gives us $5 at 1st and 5 at the goal line, not running the ball. Now, Mike Tomlin was asked about this in his post-game press conference, said they had a run-pass option out there. But, Dave, just in general, the Matt Canada play calling, I know we were sitting there watching the game. I had some questions, but what were your thoughts on it?
Well, I don't know that I want to run an RPO there just because if you really want to run the ball, don't give your quarterback the option to pass it. That would be the only thing of what I would say there. But I also don't blame them for doing the RPO. But the way that, when Detroit's playing 6 defensive linemen there, then that's the option. But if you're not going to run it, you've got to execute the pass. And they didn't do that either. So it just, some people are like, oh, the play calling. I don't think the play calling was terrible. I think they were doing what they needed to do at times. It wasn't great. They marched down the field and scored 7 points the first drive, and that's the only touchdown of the game for them. That's the disheartening thing is that it didn't continue to grow on other things other than, they had another touchdown that was called back on. You could call that holding call on every single offensive play if you wanted to, and they chose to call it there to bring back a touchdown. So play calling was just, I'm not saying it was terrible, but I'm not saying it was great. I'm saying it was
My issue was the 50 to 31 run to pass ratio in weather like that with a backup quarterback. And Najee Harris, we'll talk about him in a second. He averages 4 yards a carry in this game. I believe that was his best yards per carry of the season. And you only give it to him 26 times. And I understand that everyone's like, well, that's still 26 touches, but he's obviously running well. He is running well. But here's a good question. And this kind of ties in with the offensive philosophy we're talking about. B meant low. I guess I said that correctly. I'm sorry if I didn't. $5 is the tip. And thank you very much. Do you guys think Green should move to guard and get a true center? I think that the answer to this question depends on the severity of the injury, especially to Dotson. I feel like Dotson's was, I guess, at least on the first reporting, was more serious. They said he had to be carted off. I'm not sure if it was out of the stadium or whatnot, but Kendrick Green does have position flexibility, but he's also a rookie. Let's keep that in mind. Having him go to a different position might be extremely difficult. And they do still have BJ Finney. But if the question is, Dave, what if they don't have either guards available in week 11? What do they do? So what do you think about that, Dave?
Well, they've got one on the practice squad. And I don't know. As fast as Kevin Dotson was ruled out, I'm worried about that one. That's the one I'm worried about the most. But to answer the question that was brought up, to me, that is a fantastic question to ask ourselves in March. Is Kendrick Green the answer at center, or does he need to go to guard? I don't see them making that change mid-season. There's a chance that they could, but I don't know that that's the most pressing thing right now. It was raining hard. You could see it on TV. We'll have to ask Bad how miserable it was with him there. Boy, I picked a winner of a game to have him go to.
Yeah, he did.
But still, you can't make excuses. You've got to get it done. So I don't know that making the move right now, I don't know that he could be that serviceable at guard because he's been so focused at center right now. That's why I think if there's going to be a move, they might need to make that call in the offseason.
Yeah, and obviously Kendrick Green had a couple high snaps, none more egregious than the third high snap that sailed over Rudolph's head, and Najee Harris was able to recover. It was reminiscent of the wild card game last year when Pouncey on the first offensive play snapped it over Roethlisberger's head and resulted in a touchdown for the Browns. But the Steelers had every opportunity to win this game, and they literally shot themselves in the foot repeatedly, whether it was the high snap by Kendrick Green, whether it was Deontay Johnson's fumble in overtime, whether it was Pat Freiermuth's fumble in overtime. Just some really inexcusable play for the Steelers when it mattered the most. So, but let's continue down the box score here. Let's go to the running game. Najee Harris finishes 26 for 105, 4-yard average, 12-yard long. Did not hit pay dirt, should have, but didn't. It was called back by holding Mason Rudolph.
But he didn't.
Benny Snell had 1 carry for 4 yards, and I said Mason Rudolph 4 for 36. The Steelers, on as a team, rushed 31 times for 145, a 4.7-yard average. Dave, the running game, what do you think?
I think the running game was fine. I wish they would have leaned on it a little bit more. But as our main guy in the live chat, I'm trying to find his comment. I probably can't anymore. The artist formerly known as Solarverse, known as Bully Mob Kennel, said, do you think Najee's ankle was bothering him a little bit the way he was running at times? Maybe they were afraid to lean on him too hard and they didn't like their other options at the position. So maybe that's why they're throwing the ball 50 times in a game where they have to play 70 minutes because of that ankle, ankle. I can't remember. I can't even remember because it was from Thursday, that maybe that was part of the issue. So I would, if so, that's just another one of those, terrible things all coming together to make a bad situation.
Yeah. When the running game, if you're going to give it to him 26 times, you clearly are not concerned about the foot. I feel like if it was a serious or significant foot injury or something you were concerned with, you either weren't going to play him or you would be splitting those carries more with Benny Snell or Balaj, one or the other. Mm-hmm. Tyler W gives $2, said fans who predicted a loss should be mad with a tie.
Shouldn't be mad with a tie.
Oh, shouldn't be mad with a tie.
Yeah, so if you thought the Steelers were going to lose when you heard all this stuff going into the game, then the fact that they tied, you should be happy. That's his point.
But let's add, since they brought it up, is a tie better than a loss in this situation, Dave?
I mean, yeah, it's half a win when it really comes
point. It is
to the standings. I mean, and I know what we're saying is the emotional reaction. To me, this Steelers team probably it feels like a loss. It probably feels like, and I don't mind it feeling like a loss, but I mean, by the numbers, you basically get a half a win. That takes tiebreakers off the table when it comes to everything with the Steelers now. Their division record doesn't matter. Their conference record now doesn't matter unless somebody else ends up with another tie in there. Because it's going to come down to they're either going to be a half a game ahead or like half a game behind. We're right back to 2018 all over again.
Yeah. The Steelers are the tiebreaker now.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's continue on to the receiving core. Deontay Johnson, 7 catches on 13 targets for 83 yards. He had a long of 36. And again, that critical fumble in overtime might have ended it. That might have been the drive that ended the game, believe it or not. Ray McLeod, 9 catches, most by the Steelers on 12 targets, 63 yards. Pat Freiermuth, 5 catches, 9 targets. He did have a really bad drop, and then he also had a fumble. He had 31 yards, in case I didn't say that. Najee Harris, 4 for 28 on 4 targets. James Washington, 2 catches for 15 yards and a touchdown. That was 6 targets. You thought at the beginning of the game that Washington was going to explode. I mean, that first drive, they hit him early, hit him often. He scores a touchdown. After that, pretty much nothing. Eric Ebron, 2 catches for 13 yards on 2 targets. Derek Watt actually had a catch for 9 on one target. So, again, let's talk about the pass catchers here, Dave. What do you think?
I mean, nothing that outstanding. There was, a few drops, but you're going to get drops in the rain. I would say there would have been drops on both sides, but Detroit didn't throw the ball enough to really drop it. They really didn't come through, especially, 2 of them fumbling the ball away. This is where you would give this group like an F just because you got to finish.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a game We've all seen these games before where you need big players to make big plays. Then you need players to step up, whether it's offense, defense. I think defensively, pretty much that happened. We'll talk about the defense in the second part of this podcast, but I believe like that did happen. But on offense, I didn't feel like it happened. You had moments where you had the ball in technically, and most would say your best wide receiver's hands in Deontay Johnson, making plays, trying to make plays, and fumbles the football. Pat Fryermuth, who's been one of the more reliable pass catchers on the team, another fumble. You talk about some questionable decisions by Ray McLeod as well. So it's definitely a head scratcher on offense. But nonetheless, let's talk about the offensive line. Like I said, they didn't give up a sack. They did rush the ball for over 140 yards. Dave, if you're assessing the offensive line, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, you had some costly penalties. You had a horrible snap when you couldn't afford it, which anytime it's a horrible snap, you can't afford it. But in all, they weren't getting Mason Rudolph killed, and they were running the ball. But this isn't a very good defense either. So at the same time, you're like, it doesn't look that bad, but against who they were facing and the injuries they had on the Lions as well, it needed to be more. And obviously, if it would have been more, there's a decent chance they win this game.
Well, I think that, to me, I thought the offensive line played well, all things considered. You lose both guards. You have Joe Haig at right guard. You have a center, basically, let's say J.C. Hassenauer is essentially a center playing left guard, and they're still able to run the football. They were still getting some push. They did protect. Mason Rudolph was obviously more mobile than Ben Roethlisberger would be, and that's expected. I didn't think the offensive line played poorly outside of the Kendrick Green snaps that you mentioned. Like I said, I'm really curious to see how this offensive line shakes out because everyone wants to see Zach Banner get in there. But Dave, as far as I do, the injuries are not a tackle. The issue is not a tackle. It's guard. Yeah. So you have one in BJ Finney. I guess you roll with J.C. Hassenauer as the other. If you're without both of these guards next week, is that what you do?
It's what you got to do. I mean, it's like I say, I'm really concerned about Dotson. I think maybe Turner. I don't know the extent of his injury. He just all of a sudden wasn't there anymore, and
that was at halftime, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't. It was.
I thought it was.
Was it right after halftime? It might have been.
Everyone was just like, "Wow, Trey Turner's not out there. What's going on?"
So I really don't know the extent of these guys, but I mean, that's what you're going to have to do. And you're probably going to have to try to at least get another one on the practice squad, if not on the 53. And it's the Steelers are going to be kind of reeling from this kind of stuff, depending on how it plays out in the next couple of days.
Yeah. Like I said, the injuries make this even worse than just the tie. And that's bad enough.
Yeah.
All right, let's get this super chat up here. That's Meat Whip 21. Yeah. 5, is that euros?
Sure.
Wow, never seen more slapstick during an NFL game. It looks like a German GFL Division 3 game. Greetings from Germany. I wish I knew what the GFL Division 3 was.
But you know what? He got us to say it.
There you go. And it must be bad because if he's comparing the Steelers to that, that's not good. Another $1.99 from Monster 19 says, glad it wasn't a loss, but sheesh. Sheesh is a good way to describe it. All right, let's talk about there's not much to I feel like this is a horrible game to have to discuss in length, but we're going to do it anyways. David, if there was we did talk about Matt Canada and the play calling, and you kind of thought that it was a product of the way the game was unfolding. Is there anything on offense? I mean, we don't even know if Ben Roethlisberger is going to be back next week based on the NFL protocols. It depends on him testing negative, I think 2 straight times before he can return. Mike Tomlin did say after the game when he was asked about it that they do a good job of kind of keeping Roethlisberger isolated anyways to hope of, just in case if there is some type of outbreak on the team, he wouldn't be a close contact or anything like that. So he said they're not really worried about having other players test positive. So that's not bad, but where's the hope for this offense moving forward, looking at their situation going into week 11?
It's, I mean, everywhere. It's the injuries and the people that are out. I mean, my My goodness, is Chase Claypool going to be able to come back for week 11? I don't know, because when you say somebody's week to week, you're not thinking about, are they going to play this week? You're thinking about, are they going to be able to play the next week? Don't know if Roethlisberger's back. Don't know the guard situation. Someone said it in the live chat as I'm flipping around looking at other things. I did see one of these and said, the injury situation is more concerning than the fact that they tied the game. And I honestly, I don't know that I can disagree with that statement, that it's the injuries and everything moving forward. So we'll get to the defense though.
Yeah. The thing about the offense is this. I mean, everyone loves the Tomlinisms. The standard is a standard, excuse me, next man up, yada, 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 all that stuff. But when it comes down to facts and you lose 2 starting guards, you're already down your best wide receiver, some would say, in Chase Claypool. You don't have your starting quarterback available. And everyone can say all they want. And I did it on the podcast as well, trying to spin this in a positive light. That's just who I am. It does handicap your offense a lot.
Yeah.
And so the Steelers and Matt Canada had to probably stick with plays that they were comfortable with, that Mason Rudolph was comfortable with, that, not having Chase Claypool, you're having to rely on Ray McLeod for 9 catches. That's the type of day it was. 50 throws in that weather. It's a situation where, for me, it's like, okay, this group, this offense, since we're talking about offense in this segment of the podcast, it was tough. It was tough sledding, and it was should have been expected to be tough sledding. I said I said 24-13. I kept my prediction the same, but if Najee Harris's touchdown counts, it's a different story altogether. If they don't fumble the football as many times as they do, especially in overtime. But go ahead, Dave. You want to say something?
Let's just go back to September 5th. Leading into week 1, if we would have said at the midpoint of the season, we'd be dealing with a game where Mason Rudolph is taking snaps while Joe Haeg is playing guard with J.C. Hassenauer, and 12 targets are going to Ray McLeod, while Derek Tuska or Taco Charlton is playing opposite of Alex Highsmith. We would have been like, who, what, and where? You know what I'm saying?
What in the world happened? What went down?
Where are we? And but the thing is, it's just when you see what ended up having to happen by the end of this game, even how it got there throughout this game, let alone how it got there throughout this season. And it's like, you've got no Juju Smith-Schuster. You got no Chase Claypool. I mean, Najee's being Najee, but he might have been dinged up to take more than the 26 carries and how many receptions he had. Hold on. 4 receptions he already had out of the 30 touches that he had. Whether he was or he wasn't. But I mean, my goodness. And you had to do it in the rain. It's just, it's ridiculous. And yet the Steelers still should have won this game. I mean, as I'm sitting on your couch, I was afraid to say the words out loud to you. But I'm like, this is the kind of game where it feels like the Steelers are just going to turn it over and hand the field goal to the Lions. Well, they turned it over twice. They just didn't hand the field goal to the Lions. And that's why, rather than losing the game, they just weren't able to win it.
Offensively, kind of felt like if it could go wrong, it did go wrong. It was one of those games. And you can always have, I think most teams have one of those games at least a season where it's like, man, if it could go wrong, it went wrong. Most would say that Baltimore, they would say that on Thursday night down in Miami. You look at Tampa Bay, they've lost 2 straight games after losing to Washington this Sunday. So it does happen in the NFL. I'm not excusing the Steelers' performance, but there are games where, like, man, if it could have gone wrong, it went wrong in this game. And I would say that this was the one for the Steelers. Sean Manahan gives us $2 as after 2 high snaps, Mason should have been under center. Yeah, I could see that, but at the same time, you got to run your offense. You got to run the offense. So, all right. Tell you what, enough of the offense. There's a lot to talk about on the defensive side. If you're listening on the podcast side, head over to part 2. If you're watching us live on Facebook or YouTube, stay tuned. We're not going anywhere. We will be right back. All right, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to the second segment of the Steelers postgame show. I'm Jeff Hartman, senior editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, joined by Dave Schofield, and we are breaking down the 16-16 tie with the Detroit Lions in Week 10 at Heinz Field. And let's talk about the defense. This is a game where I think the most angry that fans were was probably defensively. Like I said, did you expect Mason Rudolph to come in and light up the world on fire? No, no one should have expected that. They hoped, maybe, but expectations were that the defense was going to win this game for the team, and they really didn't. Dave, what's your knee-jerk reaction to the defensive side of the football?
I'm just going to knee-jerk. You know how I do. I throw out numbers, okay? Yep. The Steelers gave up 20 rushing yards in the first quarter, okay? In the second quarter, they gave up 94. In the third quarter, they gave up 95. Now, I don't know if things were if overtime and fourth quarter is grouped together here, because right now my overtime stats say 0. So this might even be combined with overtime. If not, it's just the fourth quarter, back to 20. So in the middle of the game, they just stopped tackling and let the Lions run like crazy. And you know what? I can't wait for Jeffrey to break this down with a film room. Then they figured it out and stopped it again. And it got to a point where the Lions couldn't really do anything with the football in the fourth quarter or overtime, but the Steelers just couldn't do it either. They kept shooting themselves in the foot. So it's that run defense for that time period in there, not even the whole game. But I mean, they gave up more than a game's worth of rushing in each the second quarter and the third quarter. You know, I mean, seriously, you would love for the Steelers to only have 94 yards rushing in a game that they give up. They gave up just that much in the second quarter. You would love for it to be 95. To me, they gave up 2 separate games of rushing in each the second and the third quarter. And that's just not acceptable. At least they got it figured out, but man, it took too long.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. That was ugly in every facet. So let's get this super chat here. Steven Garcia gives us $4.99. That ugliness of the run defense showed up again. We need to it. Also been so disappointed in the inside linebacker play. Dave, just real quick, you think Tuitt is going to be playing at all this year?
I still have it about a 50-50. But even if he does come back, I don't know that it's the answer. Just like, as you can see, coming back from an injury, coming back into stuff, not getting great play from Devin Bush. You know, after coming back from his injury, maybe you're not going to get that great from Stephon Tuitt, thinking he's just going to be an answer and he can come right back to what he was at the end of last year might be too much. And that might be why they're taking more time with him. So, you know, what they need is 2020 Stephon Tuitt. And I don't even know if that's an option anymore.
Well, think about the pressure, you know, on him. Where the Tuitt comes back and everyone's thinking, oh my gosh, the savior has returned essentially for the Steelers run defense. That would be difficult for anyone to come back in and just step right up and not miss a beat. I have been surprised pleasantly by a couple players like Isaiah Loudermilk. Dave, did you have any expectations for Isaiah Loudermilk coming into this season?
No.
Did you even think he would play?
The expectation was he should not be getting a helmet on game day. That was the expectation. You know, you're not even calling on him, but you didn't even know that Stephon Tuitt was going to be a what it was. And even with that, if Alo was still healthy, Loudermilk, I got to look back. I don't know how many games he was inactive to start the season, but he was. And that's what you wanted. You wanted him to not even have to log snaps. And now, not only that, they're out there. I can't wait to see the snap counts because, my goodness, it seemed like in overtime and everything, he was the guy out there along with Hayward. I almost messed up and said Hayden. Yeah, crazy.
Well, you know, Mike Tomlin after the game said a lot of the issues he felt were on tackling, just pure and simple tackling.
Yeah.
I don't know if I buy all of that. There were definitely some scheme things they probably did that they fixed. But let's talk about the one position a lot of fans want to talk about the most is inside linebacker. Who's been more disappointing this season to you, Dave? Devin Bush or Joe Schobert?
Devin Bush.
Okay. Would you say the same in this game?
Well, yeah. I mean, Joe Schobert had 13 tackles still. Yeah. But like I say, some of those tackles that they're coming downfield, you know, if they're 15 yards down the field, then okay, you stopped them there at least. I mean, you can't complain too much when they score a 42-yard running touchdown where the guy just doesn't get tackled. At least, you know, you would have taken a 15-yard gain there. But you don't want all your tackles coming downfield. I'm not saying he did or he didn't. There was times where I noticed him getting up in there, pretty well. But Jeffrey said it. You got to keep your linebackers clean. The defensive line's got to absorb those guys. And it just seemed like the Lions were constantly running extra linemen out there, 2-3 tight ends. I mean, it's like, did they even have more than one wide receiver and one running back? And they were just trying to outnumber the Steelers to where they could come off to the linebackers. And they were doing that a lot, and that allowed them to run the ball. But to me, at least, Joe Schobert, I didn't have more expectations for him than I had for Devin Bush coming into the season. And so therefore, I still feel that he's playing better than Devin Bush right now. So therefore, that's why Bush is the more disappointing.
You said you find missed tackles, right? But it's unofficial.
Yeah, there's not an official stat. There's not even an official stat for tackles. That's not an official NFL stat. So you can, why did someone say that Schobert had 13 and someone else said that he had 11? Because they're not officially kept by the NFL. So, but missed tackles.
Do you have that number? Do you have that number, or is that
what,
something that
missed tackles?
Yeah.
Honestly, when I get them when the PFF grades come out the next day. So I don't have missed tackles right now. I would love to know what that was, because I'll probably make up a number for my By the Numbers article and say it felt like this many, and we'll see how many there really were. Because it felt like there was a lot.
Felt like 20.
Yeah. Because it felt like there was 5 on the touchdown alone, if not more.
Well, how many times did you see the running back get hit at the line of scrimmage and then somehow pushes their way for 7, 8, 9, 10 yards extra? It's like, God.
I don't know that I saw that much, believe it or not. I'm going to explain why. I felt when the Steelers hit the running back at the line of scrimmage, they did a good job of getting them down. It was when they weren't hitting the running back until he was already 2 yards past the line of scrimmage, they couldn't do anything to slow him down. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But then again, I had to be looking at my computer screen during a lot of plays because I had to write all these injury articles because everyone kept getting hurt. Sorry.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
All right, Wilson, Pavak is $9.99. Says, feels like we've been falling asleep in quarters 2 and 3 for a few games now, even if not an answer to it can help. Tackling has been really bad. Schobert has been disappointing on both the run and the pass. You agree with that, Dave, in terms of the quarters 2 and quarter 3 thing?
It seems like that's the middle part of the game that they're really. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read some breaking news that Michael was sharing with us. It's just that that TJ Watt two injuries on the same play and he's having scans done. That's what it was. Yeah. So back to the Schobert thing, or no, the second and third quarter thing. It really does feel like that's the downtime for the Steelers more than just this game. But this game is the most fresh in my mind, so it definitely feels that way.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely an interesting aspect of the game, the middle of the game, and there are lulls. There are lulls in every game, but man, it just seems like some of them are very, very blatant. We'll put it that way. All right, let's go to the defensive side. The inside linebackers, 13 tackles, 8 solo for Joe Schobert, 1 tackle for loss. Devin Bush, 8 tackles, 5 solo, no tackles for loss, no quarterback hits. Let's look at the outside linebackers. Alex Highsmith, 11 tackles, 8 solo, 2 tackles for loss, 1 quarterback hit. I thought he had a good game. 5 tackles, 3 solo, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits. Charlton.
Who was that one you just said?
TJ Watt.
Okay.
5 tackles, 3 solo, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits. Taco Charlton, 3 tackles, 1 solo. And Tushka, I'm trying to see if he even registered a tackle. I don't think he did. So let's talk about the outside linebackers a little bit. What were your thoughts with the pass rush? And we can throw in, if you want to throw pass rush, Cam Hayward, 5 total tackles, 3 solo, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits.
I thought Highsmith had a sack in there. Did they give that all to Hayward?
They gave that all to Hayward.
They gave it all to Hayward. So, because I thought Highsmith, he did a nice job. I mean, and then he had some stops on running plays. I thought that he did a nice job, especially after TJ Watt went out. Other than that, I didn't really notice anything when you're talking about the edge rushers. How many times did Detroit throw the ball? They were sacked 5 times, but Jared Goff only had 13 attempts. So let's just say that was 18. They sacked him on almost one third of the on one third of the plays. Almost got a third of the plays in which they sacked him.
Well, that's like someone on my Twitter feed. They were like, "Oh my gosh, where's TJ Watt?" And it's like, at this time they'd only thrown the ball 9 times. I mean, what do you want him to do? I mean, they're only going to run the ball, and they're going to run it right up the gut because that's where it seems like the weakness of the Steelers' defense resides. What do you want him to do? If he comes crashing down the middle, most likely the running back bounces outside. There's no contain, and it's a big gain on the outside. In a game where the Steelers only faced Jared Goff, was 14 of 25 for 114 yards. They had 4 sacks, like you said.
Yeah, and I threw out that 13 number. I was actually sitting on just the second half. So that's why that number was 25 attempts when I said it was 13. I was that. So I want to make sure that I clarify that I had stated that incorrectly. I was like, wait a second, he threw it more than that. But yeah, still, I mean, you got 5 sacks. You only completed 14 passes.
And the Steelers had 6 quarterback hits. So your thoughts, my thoughts on the pass rush were it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad at all. But let's talk about the run defense, Dave. I mean, in general, we kind of touched on this earlier with the knee-jerk reactions, but just what are your thoughts on the run defense? I mean, you can look up if you want to go ahead and say any stat you want for the defense.
I mean, I kind of already laid it down there, but I mean, it was really good to start the game. It was really bad in the second quarter. It was really bad again in the third quarter. And then they cleaned it up to where Detroit couldn't go out and run the ball, would get down and get any more field goals to win it. So, I mean, at least when it started in the second quarter, it didn't go all the way to the end. At least they figured it out eventually. But my goodness, I mean, to give up, 189 yards between those 2 quarters, not acceptable. Half the game, and they had 189 yards.
So what did they finish with in terms of run, in terms of rushing? Let me look at it.
229 yards on 39 carries.
Golly. And what were the Steelers giving up on average coming into this game?
100 and 709. I have it here, but I have to look it up. But yeah, I mean, it was over 100, but it wasn't great. And you kind of said that to me during the game. It's like, oh, well, the Steelers are ranked pretty good with against the run, but yeah, they're 109.75 is what they were against the run coming into this, but it's just not anymore. My goodness. I mean, that's like something you might expect the Ravens to do against the Steelers or the Browns, someone who's this really great rushing team. That was not Detroit coming into this one. That was definitely not the Lions. Their run offense they were averaging 93.125 yards per game coming into this one. But they generally were in games that they were behind and couldn't run it as much. But they stuck with it, and they found something. All they did was find a little something that worked, and they kept rolling with it.
Okay, well, the run defense and the tackling, we've talked on that a good bit. Let's talk about the secondary a little bit. Again, didn't have to make a ton of plays because they didn't throw the ball that much. Minka Fitzpatrick had an interception that was nullified by a Trey Norwood roughing the passer call, which would have really turned the tide. Trey Norwood almost had an interception, had several pass breakups to his record. Justin Lane, not Justin Lane. James Pierre, I thought stepped in well.
Yeah, wasn't having to come in for
Joe Hayden. For Joe Hayden, he came in and did well in his stead. What were your thoughts on the secondary? Again, no, they didn't get any takeaways, so it's not that. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, they couldn't throw the ball. I mean, Detroit couldn't throw the ball, and I mean, they held their top receiver to no receptions with the tight end. And I think you kind of saw why, because when they did try to throw it to him in overtime, Minka comes up with the pick. That hold call wiped it out. It was what it was. I thought even guys having to come. I mean, Joe Hayden even had the nice, and he wasn't trying to knock down that ball. And I don't know if that was the play he got hurt on, or if it was one of a play or two after that. But that's when he went out, or was after that series, and he made it. He was going for the interception the whole way. He wasn't trying to knock it down. He just happened to knock it down because he was trying to pull that one in. So in all, I mean, if you want to see a bright spot anywhere, I would say it was the secondary. But then again, it was raining really hard, and it was the 0-8 Detroit Lions.
Yeah, so the secondary, like you said, they weren't really tested much, and
But you still got to play, and that's
still
what
have
they
to make the
did.
plays. You still have to make the plays for sure. The Steelers, in terms of pass defenses, Trell Edmonds, who I thought had a good game, 5 total tackles, 4 solo, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, a pass defense, and a quarterback hit. So it's worth noting his name. Other pass defenses, let's see here. Joe Hayden did have that 1. Trey Norwood with 2. My goodness, Trey Norwood, I think he can. I know that by the letter of the law, that was a roughing the passer because he hit him below the knee. Did he really even hit him though?
It looked like there was minimal contact, but at the same time, did TJ Watt really get hit on that block the previous week? You know, it's funny.
Yeah.
You go low at a quarterback, and they're going to flag you even if you don't make hardly any contact, if any at all. And the same kind of thing happened with that call where they, just because TJ Watt was good and made them miss when they try to do something illegal, didn't mean that they didn't try to do something illegal, which took him out of the play. So that one was tough because to me it was almost the timing. He was going to the ground when Goff still had his, he still had the ball in his hand, but that's just something they're going to call, even if you didn't, even if Jared Goff doesn't even throw that ball, then they're probably still going to call it because he hit him low, even if you would have hit him for the sack, which is the rule. I don't like it, but it is what it is.
Well, let's talk about the officiating. Let's spend some time on this. In general, I mean, the Chicago Bears fans out there are going to say what goes around comes around, and they're going to say, you all deserve to have some calls go against you after last Monday night. But some of these calls, I think maybe one of the most egregious calls wasn't the Dan Moore holding. I thought was bad, negated an interception or negated a touchdown, but also was the running into the kicker call on the punt. Now, granted, they ended up
sold
punting
it.
The ball. Yeah, he did. I don't even know if Killebrew really made contact with him at all. What was your takeaway just from the officiating in general?
Like it's been all season, inconsistent. I mean, you're going to call something in. I mean, the offensive pass interference on James Washington only because he put his hand on the guy's shoulder. I mean, and then jumped backwards to try to catch the ball. I mean, that didn't change anything because they took the penalty, moved him out of field goal range, scored or got exactly 10 yards the next play, and kicked the ball from the very same spot. And he didn't come down in bounds with it in the first place. So it changed nothing. But it's the whole notion of that play. I still, I'm sorry, I have to bring it up only because you pointed it out. Worse than the officiating is Fox trying to cover football games. My goodness, because they're still trying to figure out that offensive pass interference on Deontay Johnson where he pushed him out, pushed off on him or something. And I'm just like, the flag's already on the ground. You can see it on the screen. So it's obviously not what you're looking at. If the flag's already there and their camera angles and everything else and trying to figure stuff out, I mean, you have no idea. All they want to do is zoom in on the quarterback's face up until the ball gets snapped. You don't even know where it's going to be. But let's get back to the officials because I'll let you can go off on that more. But so that didn't help the officiating either, that you couldn't even really see what they were calling because you were getting terrible replays from their NFL coverage. I mean, the Steelers are AFC, so you get them on CBS. Boy, I really did not realize that Fox was that bad whenever you look at them, game for an entire game. But the officiating, I mean, you could call that holding call on Dan Moore Jr., like I said in the first half, on almost any play in the game. The same kind of deal. And yet they called it there to take off the touchdown. I'm not even sure what Devin Bush really did on that play because we never saw a really good replay of it. That's why I'm complaining about Fox is I would have liked to have seen better angles of what was being called to know if the officials really were bad or not. It's so hard to interpret.
I'm glad you brought that up. It was the defensive holding that negated the interception, not the roughing the passer. I made a mistake. I misspoke. That's my fault. I apologize. I was thinking about the roughing the passer, I believe, happened after that. I want to say to move them into what we thought was going to be field goal range. And I think it was maybe Edmonds that came in with the sack or Hayward that had a sack that kind of bumped him back out. But goodness gracious, I really don't want to dwell on this game longer than we have to. If there's a game where the Steelers take the film and just burn it, in the team meeting and say, let's move on? Wouldn't it be this one, Dave?
Probably. But I mean, they it's so tough because they were trying to do what they had to do. I mean, this would have been. I mean, you talk about the Steelers winning ugly against Seattle and winning ugly against Chicago. If they would have managed to not fumble it at the end, maybe kick a really long field goal, they were trying to get a few more yards there, and I don't blame them. But the play that Freiermuth fumbled, he wasn't gaining anything. I was like, if you're going to waste valuable time, at least try to get a few yards. If you're just going to be content catching it at the line of scrimmage and going out of bounds right there, why even run a play? Just kick it.
Yeah.
But to me, it was still a little bit long for being in the rain. But that would have been the definition of like the ugliest of ugly wins. And therefore, that's why it didn't come through. And it was just a tie.
A tie. It's funny. Every year I always hope that no one ties so I don't have to put that third column when I do like the standings in the AFC North recap. And now it's the Steelers. Again, since 2018, a tie. Oh, well, what are you going to do? Now you look at the Steelers traveling to the Los Angeles Chargers and what starts a really tough stretch for this team. And you're looking at, is Ben Roethlisberger going to be available? What about these injuries? Will TJ Watt miss a week, 2 weeks, anytime? We don't know. The fact that he's having to have that hip and knee further evaluated means that you're looking at probably an injury that might have him miss some time, just like when Chase Claypool's toe needed an MRI. Well, it's not just a regular old toe injury. That's something that's a little bit more significant that they wanted to get a better look at. The ankle injuries to the guards. There's so much that can go either way for this Steelers team that I can't stress enough to those that are listening to this to check out BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. We literally have everything that you would want in terms of breaking news about the team, rumors, updates, all that good stuff. So make sure you're checking out that website, as well as our podcast platform. I don't want to plug that. Wherever you get your podcast, just search Steelers or Behind the Steel Curtain, subscribe. You get so much more than just these shows that are on YouTube and Facebook. And I think you all enjoy them if you're a diehard Steeler fan. But Dave, let's do some final thoughts on this game. What are your final thoughts?
Final thoughts is that this game, I don't even feel was as much about the play of the team coming out of it as it is the situation that they are now in, especially with the injuries. I mean, moving forward, you can talk about if the team is trending in the right direction or the wrong direction, winning ugly and learning from your wins and improving. I've said it before. I went off on it. The playoffs don't start next week. You've just got to get better by the playoffs and win enough games along the way to get there. Now, because of the injuries piling up and the situation that the teams get in, you just got to try to survive from week to week to get a team out there that can compete, to try to get some of these players back to then get better by that time. And that's why it's really hard to think of that right now, to think, oh, this team taking steps and moving in the right direction for January. That's really hard when you have no idea if either of your starting guards is going to be available anymore. You have no idea if your all-pro defensive player of the year should have been twice and should have been should have been on his way this year too, is going to be able to play. You have no idea if your number one corner is going to be all right. You have no idea if your Hall of Fame quarterback is going to be able to clear protocol for the next game. There are so many question marks about this game, and that's before you even get to the play on the field. That's why this is one of those that you're just like, I don't know where this team is going right now just because of their circumstances. So what this all comes down to is following the news, following places like BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. That when we get the news, we'll get it out to you all as soon as we can get it and see what's going on so we can have any more kind of an idea of where this team is going based on these circumstances. So, I mean, it is what it is. Standard is a standard, next man up, yada, yada, yada. You can say all those things, but right now it just kind of sucks.
And if this isn't a better indication that it is in any given Sunday week in the NFL, especially right now in the league, you look at last week and all the losses to Buffalo losing to Jacksonville. And let's be honest, there were fans that were predicting a Steelers loss before Roethlisberger went on the COVID reserve list. There were Steeler fans that were predicting a loss before the TJ Watt injury, before both guards left the game. And so they get out with a tie, and now they have a lot of question marks. You just don't know. Any given week, we shall see. So with that said, we're going to wrap this up on a post-game show. I thank you all for listening. Make sure you check us out next week. The Steelers, is that a 4:25, Dave? Is it a night game? What is it?
What, next week?
Yeah.
That's Sunday Night Football.
Oh, gosh. Shoot me now. Okay, that's Sunday night. Maybe we'll have Michael back on a post-game show.
Hey, at least what we watched today was at 1:00 when God intended NFL football to be played.
Exactly.
So, but I mean, one quick thing I can say I know is you talked about all the games last week. I mean, we were so focused on the Steelers. Washington upsets Tampa Bay. The Patriots blow out the Browns, which now means the Steelers were the only AFC North team to beat their AFC East opponents, and they had to do it to the Bills because they each all had their own individual matchups. All the other AFC North teams lost. Right now, as we speak, while this is live, the Panthers are crushing the Cardinals 23-3. This just tells you what you said with any given Sunday over the last 2 weeks, and we'll see it in our survivor pool because, man, there'll be a handful of people left, maybe, when it's all said and done, because things are just kind of going crazy here in the middle of the season, and the Steelers found a way to not lose, but unfortunately just wasn't a win.
That's right. So make sure you check us out in all those locations, behindthesteelcurtain.com, our podcast platform. We will see you all next Sunday night or Monday morning, really late after the Steelers Week 11 game. Take it easy.